A cave is genuinely one of the best forms of shelter nature ever offered. No predator can approach from the left, the right, or from behind. This is simple logic, and no one disputes it. But the mouth of a cave is only the first few meters. Archaeologists keep finding traces of human activity hundreds of meters deeper, well past the point where weather, predators, or any practical need for shelter could possibly explain the trip. Neanderthals were building elaborate structures down there 176,000 years ago. Why anyone needed to go that far into the dark is a question science is still trying to answer. Before we go any further, please subscribe to this channel. Your support genuinely helps us keep making films like this one. Thank you. Now, let's be precise about what a cave actually is, archaeologically speaking, because the popular image most people carry is almost entirely wrong. When most people picture a Paleolithic cave dwelling, they picture something close to a stage set. A wide, sunlit opening, a fire burning near the entrance, painted animals on nearby walls, figures sitting comfortably within sight of daylight. This image is not fabricated out of nothing. It reflects a genuine and well-documented pattern. The overwhelming majority of confirmed prehistoric human activity in caves did, in fact, take place within the twilight zone. Near the entrance, the region still reached by at least some ambient daylight, where people could see without artificial light, where smoke from a fire could vent naturally, and where the specific advantages of cave shelter, a fixed ceiling, 3 enclosed sides, a single defensible opening, could be enjoyed without sacrificing any connection to the outside world. Archaeologists sometimes distinguish this zone specifically from what lies beyond it. The dark zone, the portion of a cave system extending past the reach of any daylight whatsoever, where visibility depends entirely on carried fire or artificial light, and where a person who loses that light source loses, in a very literal sense, all ability to navigate. This distinction matters enormously for the story this film is telling, because the entrance zone and the dark zone represent two almost entirely different categories of human behavior, requiring two almost entirely different explanations. Sheltering near a cave entrance requires no particular courage, no specialized technology beyond basic firemaking, and no unusual motivation beyond ordinary, practical self-preservation. Traveling deep into the dark zone requires all of these things simultaneously: a reliable, portable light source, detailed spatial memory sufficient to navigate a return journey through utterly featureless, disorienting terrain, and, critically, some reason compelling enough to justify undertaking a genuinely dangerous journey into an environment offering no additional protective advantage over the entrance zone already available just a short distance behind. The dominant scholarly position on Paleolithic dwelling for most of the 20th century and continuing into recent years has treated cave occupation generally and dark zone activity specifically with considerable caution. Pablo Arias, a professor of prehistoric archaeology at the University of Cantabria, addressing this question directly in a widely reported interview in December of 2023, offered a characteristically careful formulation. During the Paleolithic, people lived in small, mobile bands, moving from one place to another, probably covering large areas. And while some sites may have served as longer-term stopping points or gathering locations where different groups convened for special occasions, he explicitly cautioned against describing any of them as permanent residences in any meaningful sense. This caution reflects a broader, well-founded skepticism within the field. Genuine, unambiguous evidence of sustained cave habitation, particularly the kind of organized domestic space, hearths, sleeping areas, tool-working zones, waste disposal patterns, that would clearly indicate repeated, structured, long-term use rather than brief, occasional shelter, has historically been rare, difficult to date with precision, and easy to overinterpret from fragmentary remains. This caution is precisely what makes a specific 2023 discovery in northern Spain so significant, because it provides exactly the kind of clear, well-preserved evidence the field had, for so long, largely lacked. In December of 2023, at a press conference held at Spain's National Archaeology Museum, researchers announced the discovery of what they described as one of the best-preserved Paleolithic dwellings anywhere in the world, located within the La Gama cave system in Cantabria. La Gama itself was not a new discovery. The broader cave system had first been identified in 1995 and has since become one of the most extensively studied Paleolithic sites in Europe, containing one of the most complete collections of Ice Age rock art anywhere on the continent, spanning a continuous span of human use from the Old Stone Age all the way through the Magdalenian period, the final major cultural phase of the European Upper Paleolithic, before the site was ultimately abandoned. What made the 2023 announcement genuinely remarkable was the specific character of what had been found. A living space, dated to approximately 16,800 years ago, preserved in a condition researchers described as appearing almost exactly as it did the moment its final occupants left it. Tools and other artifacts still scattered across the floor in the positions where they had last been used. Pablo Arias, the same researcher who had urged caution about the broader question of permanent cave residence, was directly involved in this specific discovery, and his own assessment of La Gama's significance is worth quoting at length, because it captures both the genuine importance of the find and the careful, qualified way working archaeologists actually discuss evidence of this kind. Paleolithic dwelling structures, he noted, are extremely rare in the archaeological record generally, and considerably more exceptional still when found preserved inside a cave rather than in the open air, where structural remains typically survive far more poorly. The preservation of the artifacts associated with this particular hut structure, he continued, was remarkable, and the density of recovered material unusually high, providing what he described as unique information about the organization of domestic space and the specific activities performed inside a genuine living structure during the final millennia of the Ice Age. It is worth understanding how La Gama was originally discovered and what makes the broader cave system such an unusually valuable archaeological resource. Because the 2023 dwelling announcement did not emerge from nowhere. It built directly on 3 decades of careful, cumulative excavation work. The cave was first identified in 1995 when a research team investigating the hillside above the modern village of Omoño in the Cantabria region of northern Spain, recognized signs of a previously unknown caste system beneath the surface. What made the discovery immediately significant, even before any detailed excavation had begun, was the specific way the cave's original entrance had been sealed. At some point, roughly 16,000 years ago, a rockfall closed off the cave's primary opening, trapping everything inside exactly as it had been left, and preventing any of the water infiltration, sediment disturbance, or later human reoccupation that so often complicates the interpretation of cave sites, left continuously accessible across thousands of subsequent years. This sealing event, in effect, created a time capsule, a single, undisturbed cross-section of Paleolithic life preserved at the precise moment of abandonment, without the layered confusion of later visitors, later fires, or later reuse blurring the archaeological picture. Since that 1995 discovery, La Garma has been excavated continuously by teams associated with the University of Cantabria, and the site has grown to encompass evidence spanning an extraordinary breadth of the Upper Paleolithic sequence, from the Aurignacian period, among the earliest phases of modern human presence in Europe, through the Gravettian, Solutrean, and finally the Magdalenian, the last major Ice Age cultural tradition before the climate began its final warming transition into the Holocene. Few sites anywhere in Europe preserve this complete a sequence in a single location, which is part of why La Garma has become one of the reference points against which other Paleolithic sites are frequently compared. The cave's rock art collection, distinct from the 2023 dwelling discovery but part of the same broader site, includes hundreds of individual painted and engraved figures, horses, bison, deer, and various geometric and abstract signs, distributed across multiple gallery passages, some located well within the cave's dark zone, requiring exactly the kind of sustained artificial lighting this film has already discussed, in the context of Bruniquel and Rising Star. This detail is worth holding on to, because it means La Garma itself, quite apart from the specific 2023 dwelling announcement, already provided independent evidence of deliberate dark zone activity among anatomically modern humans. Activity considerably more common and considerably less controversial than the Homo naledi case, but built on precisely the same underlying willingness to carry fire deep into an environment offering no additional shelter benefit over the entrance zone. The specific hut structure announced in 2023 was located within what researchers have designated the lower gallery of the cave system, a section that had remained sealed off from the rest of the site until the 1995 rockfall discovery made it accessible again. Excavation of this particular area proceeded carefully and slowly across multiple subsequent field seasons, consistent with standard practice for a site of this evident importance, with researchers documenting the precise position of every recovered artifact before removal, building up the detailed spatial map that ultimately allowed the 2023 team to reconstruct the hut's likely original form and function, with the level of confidence Pablo Arias described at the National Archaeology Museum press conference. The La Garma dwelling itself, based on the excavated evidence, appears to represent a deliberately constructed hut-like structure built within the cave's interior space, rather than simply an area of the cave floor that happened to accumulate debris from casual, repeated visits. This distinction matters considerably for how researchers interpret the site's significance. A hut structure implies intentional construction, a specific decision to modify and organize interior cave space for sustained habitation in a manner considerably more deliberate than simply sheltering within whatever natural configuration a cave's entrance zone happened to offer. The tools and artifacts recovered from the floor, left in place rather than removed or disturbed before the site's final abandonment, provide researchers with an unusually direct window into the specific daily activities that took place within this structure, offering a level of detail about Paleolithic domestic life that most cave sites, disturbed by thousands of years of subsequent activity, water infiltration, or natural sediment accumulation, simply cannot provide. It is worth examining more closely what specifically was recovered from the La Gama hut structure, because the level of domestic detail preserved at this site offers a genuinely rare window into the practical, moment-to-moment texture of Paleolithic daily life, distinct from the more dramatic but functionally ambiguous evidence this film has traced at Bruniquel and Rising Star. The excavated floor space within the hut structure yielded a dense concentration of worked flint tools in various stages of production and use, including finished blades, discarded manufacturing waste flakes, and at least several tools showing clear microscopic wear patterns consistent with specific tasks: hide processing, woodworking, and the butchery of animal remains among them. Faunal remains recovered from the same context include the bones of red deer, ibex, and other species known to have been hunted across this region during the relevant period, providing direct evidence of food preparation and consumption having taken place within this specific interior space, rather than exclusively at some separate location nearer the cave's entrance. This combination, tool production, tool use, food processing, and food consumption all documented within a single, spatially coherent interior structure, is precisely the kind of evidence that had, according to Arias's own stated caution about the broader question of Paleolithic permanent residence, historically been difficult to find in this specific combination and this level of preservation. Researchers have also identified what they interpret as evidence of a hearth feature associated with the structure, a concentrated area of ash and heat, affected sediment consistent with a fire maintained repeatedly at the same specific location over some span of time, rather than a single isolated burning event. A hearth of this kind, reused repeatedly rather than freshly built at a new location with each visit, itself constitutes a meaningful form of evidence for sustained or repeated occupation, since a single brief visit would be unlikely to produce this particular kind of accumulated, repeated use signature in the surrounding sediment. The broader significance of this level of domestic detail, considered alongside the genuinely different category of evidence this film has traced at Bruniquel and Rising Star, is worth stating plainly. La Gama demonstrates that at least some Paleolithic populations, at least some of the time, did engage in the kind of sustained, organized interior cave occupation that researchers like Arias had, for so long, been reluctant to confidently describe without direct supporting evidence of this specific quality. It does not resolve the deeper mystery of why Neanderthals traveled 336 meters into total darkness at Bruniquel, or why Homo naledi repeatedly navigated the narrow, dangerous passages of Rising Star. But it does establish, with a degree of confidence the field had previously lacked, that Paleolithic cave use spanned a considerably wider range of behavior than either the traditional image of brief, occasional shelter, or the more extreme, still debated dark zone cases can fully capture on their own. A genuine, sustained domestic middle ground sitting between those two extremes, now confirmed through exactly the kind of well-preserved, richly detailed evidence archaeologists had spent decades hoping to eventually find. This is worth pausing on before moving further into this film's central investigation. Because La Garma's specific location within the broader cave system matters for understanding where it fits within the entrance zone versus dark zone distinction already established. While La Garma preserves evidence of sustained interior use, it does not, on its own, resolve the deeper and considerably stranger question this film is centrally concerned with: why humans, and quite possibly non-human hominin relatives as well, repeatedly traveled far beyond any zone where daylight, fresh air, or straightforward defensive advantage could plausibly explain the journey. To investigate that deeper question, we need to travel to a different cave entirely, in a different country, and go back considerably further in time, to an underground space that had remained completely sealed and completely unvisited by any human being for tens of thousands of years before its rediscovery in 1990. Bruniquel Cave, located within the steep-sided Aveyron Valley in southwestern France, extends nearly half a kilometer in total length. For most of that length, the cave had been rendered inaccessible by a scree slope that had gradually blocked passage deep within a smaller, more easily accessible entrance chamber, sealing off the cave's deeper reaches from any human contact, for a span of time long enough that when cavers finally dug through the blockage in 1990, they were the first human beings to set foot in that deeper section, in longer than anyone could immediately determine. What those cavers eventually found, 336 meters from the cave's entrance, more than 1,000 feet, a distance representing a genuinely substantial subterranean journey through complete darkness, was a series of circular structures built directly on the cave floor, constructed from more than 400 individual stalagmites, each one deliberately broken from the cave floor, moved from its original position, and carefully arranged into two roughly oval ring formations, some sections reaching heights of up to 40 centimeters. This was not, by any reasonable interpretation, a natural formation. It represented purposeful, organized construction, requiring the coordinated effort of multiple individuals working together, deep within a completely lightless environment, using raw material quarried directly from the surrounding cave floor. Dating this construction precisely required a research team led by archaeologist Jacques Jaubert of the University of Bordeaux, whose findings, published in the journal Nature in 2016, employed uranium-thorium dating on calcite deposits that had formed naturally over the broken stalagmites after their original construction. Mineral growth that could only have begun accumulating after the stalagmites had already been broken and repositioned, providing a reliable minimum age for the structures themselves. The result? A minimum age of 176,500 years, with a margin of error of roughly 2,000 years in either direction. This dating places the construction of these structures firmly within a period when early Neanderthals inhabited Western Europe, tens of thousands of years before any anatomically modern human had yet arrived anywhere on the European continent. Whatever built these rings, in other words, was unambiguously Neanderthal, not Homo sapiens. The 1990 rediscovery of Bruniquel's deeper passages deserves a fuller account in its own right, because the specific circumstances of that rediscovery help explain why the cave's interior had remained so completely undisturbed for such an extraordinary span of time. Local cavers had known of Bruniquel's entrance chamber for generations, but the passage leading deeper into the hillside had long been blocked by an accumulated scree slope, loose rock debris that had gradually built up and sealed off further access, likely over a period of many thousands of years, following whatever original event or gradual process first destabilized that section of the cave's ceiling and walls. In 1990, a small group of speleologists exploring the accessible entrance chamber in the ordinary course of recreational cave exploration noticed a promising gap within the scree and began the difficult, physically demanding work of digging through it by hand, uncertain what, if anything, lay on the other side. What they eventually broke through into was a continuation of the cave system extending, ultimately, across several hundred additional meters. Terrain that had not felt human presence since whatever ancient event had originally sealed it away. The formal scientific investigation of the ring structures themselves did not begin immediately. It was not until Jacques Jaubert, an archaeologist at the University of Bordeaux with particular expertise in Paleolithic cave use, became involved that the structures received the kind of rigorous, systematic dating and analysis eventually published in Nature in 2016. Jaubert's team faced a genuinely difficult technical challenge in securing reliable dates for the rings, because the structures themselves, broken stone essentially, contain no organic material of the kind normally used for radiocarbon dating, and radiocarbon dating in any case becomes increasingly unreliable at ages approaching and exceeding 50,000 years, well short of what the team suspected these structures might actually represent. The solution came through uranium-thorium dating applied not to the stalagmite fragments themselves, but to the thin layers of new calcite that had continued forming naturally on top of the broken and repositioned stone after construction. A dating method capable of reaching back reliably several 100,000 years, precisely the kind of timescale this specific discovery ultimately required. The physical scale of the construction effort documented at Bruniquel is worth dwelling on directly, because more than 400 individual stalagmites, broken and moved into position, represents a substantial undertaking by any reasonable measure, particularly when performed entirely by the light of carried fire. in an environment where every additional minute spent working represented additional fuel consumed and additional risk accumulated should that fire source fail unexpectedly. Estimates of the total effort involved suggest the construction likely required the coordinated participation of multiple individuals working across a meaningful span of time, rather than representing the work of one or two people completing the task in a single extended visit, further reinforcing the picture of organized cooperative behavior. This film has already connected to the site's broader significance. The evidence for fire use at this specific location, deep within the dark zone, adds another layer of significance to the discovery. Reddened and blackened deposits. Researchers use the specific term speleofacts to describe stalagmite fragments bearing this kind of heat-altered discoloration, were identified on portions of the ring structures, in some cases directly atop individual stalagmite segments, alongside fragments of burned bone, and at least one area interpreted as a concentrated zone of char, consistent with a sustained, controlled fire having been built and maintained at that specific spot. This detail matters enormously for the broader question this film is investigating, because it demonstrates that whoever constructed these rings did not simply make a single, brief visit to this location in total darkness before immediately departing. They remained long enough, in a controlled and evidently deliberate manner, to build and maintain fire at a location 336 meters from the nearest source of natural light. Fire that, in this specific context, could only have served a small number of possible functions. Illumination sufficient to work by, warmth in an environment where the ambient cave temperature would have remained cool and stable regardless of surface conditions outside, or some combination of both, sustained deliberately across whatever span of time the construction project itself required. It is worth pausing on the specific logistical problem that any deep, dark zone cave journey actually presented. Because carrying fire underground across several hundred meters of narrow, winding passage was never a simple matter of picking up a burning branch and walking. Archaeologists have recovered direct physical evidence of the specific lighting technologies Paleolithic populations developed to solve this exact problem, and the range of solutions demonstrates a level of practical engineering considerably more sophisticated than a casual torch. Stone lamps, shallow, hand-sized depressions carved or naturally occurring in pieces of limestone or sandstone, designed to hold a quantity of rendered animal fat as fuel, with a simple fiber or moss wick providing a controlled, steady flame, have been recovered from numerous Upper Paleolithic sites across Europe, including well-documented examples from the deep decorated galleries of Lascaux itself. These lamps offered several genuine advantages over a simple burning torch: a more stable, longer-lasting flame, less vulnerable to sudden extinguishing from dripping water or errant drafts common in cave environments, a more controllable and directional light source, and fuel, rendered animal fat, that was considerably more energy-dense and slower burning than wood, making a single lamp capable of providing useful illumination for a period measured in hours, rather than the considerably shorter burn time of a simple wooden torch. Torches themselves, typically bundles of resinous wood such as pine, sometimes wrapped or treated to slow their burn rate, have left their own distinctive archaeological signature in cave environments. Reddened smoke stains on cave ceilings and walls, charcoal residue deposited along specific travel routes, and, in a small number of exceptionally well-preserved cases, actual carbonized torch fragments recovered from cave floors, abandoned or dropped by their original Paleolithic users tens of thousands of years ago. Analysis of these residues allows researchers to reconstruct, with real precision in some sites, the specific paths ancient visitors took through a cave system, since torch smoke deposits naturally accumulate more heavily along frequently traveled routes and thin out or disappear entirely in areas visited rarely or not at all, providing, in effect, a kind of ancient traffic map preserved directly on the cave's own walls and ceiling. For a journey of the scale documented at Bruniquel, 336 meters into the dark zone, followed eventually by a comparable return journey, all while carrying sufficient fuel to construct elaborate stone structures. The logistics involved would have required careful advance planning, enough torches or lamp fuel to last the full duration of both the outbound journey and whatever time was spent working at the final destination, backup fire starting capability in case a primary light source failed unexpectedly, and, critically, detailed prior knowledge of the route itself, since attempting to navigate 3,600 meters of unfamiliar dark zone passage for the first time, while simultaneously managing a limited and irreplaceable fuel supply would have represented a genuinely severe risk. This logistical complexity reinforces, once again, the broader argument this film has developed. Journeys of this kind were not impulsive, casual undertakings. They required exactly the sort of forward planning, resource management, and accumulated practical knowledge that separates a single reckless excursion from a deliberate, repeatable, culturally transmitted practice. Will Robrooks, a Paleolithic archaeologist who was not directly involved in the original Bruniquel research, but who has written extensively about its broader significance, offered a characteristically candid assessment when the findings were first published. The discovery underlines, he noted, that a considerable amount of Neanderthal material culture, including what might reasonably be called their architecture, simply failed to survive anywhere in the open-air record, precisely because organic construction materials decay, while a chance discovery like Bruniquel, sealed and protected from any subsequent disturbance for 176,000 years, preserved something that would otherwise have vanished entirely from the archaeological record. Robrooks also candidly acknowledged the genuine interpretive difficulty this specific discovery presents. Because nothing directly comparable has been found anywhere else, testing any specific hypothesis about why these rings were built or what function they served remains extremely difficult. He offered, half seriously, one deliberately mundane possible explanation: that a group of Neanderthal adolescents might simply have explored this underground environment out of ordinary youthful curiosity, breaking off stalagmites and gradually assembling them into structures over repeated visits, in much the same undirected way young people throughout history have occupied themselves during idle exploration. Whether or not that specific speculative explanation holds up, the broader implication of Bruniquel remains genuinely significant regardless of the ring's precise original purpose. It demonstrates, at minimum, that Neanderthals were capable of deliberately entering, navigating, working within, and evidently returning safely from a genuinely deep, dark zone cave environment, using fire as a portable, sustained light and heat source, engaging in coordinated group construction activity, requiring real planning and real physical effort. A level of behavioral and social complexity that, at the time of Bruniquel's publication in 2016, exceeded what many researchers had previously assumed this specific hominin species was capable of. Recent research has continued to refine the specific chronology surrounding Bruniquel's use and eventual sealing. Work led by researcher Kim Jin-wit, investigating the geological history of the cave's entrance, rather than the interior structures themselves, has helped establish a more precise timeline for when the cave system originally opened and when it eventually closed, showing that the passage became sealed sometime before approximately 142,900 years ago, likely through a gradual rockfall process, rather than any single catastrophic collapse event. This refined timeline helps researchers understand the specific window during which Neanderthal groups could have accessed and used this deep cave environment, narrowing the broader question of Bruniquel's significance into an increasingly precise chronological frame. If Bruniquel demonstrates that deep, deliberate dark zone cave use extends back considerably further in time and considerably further outside our own species than researchers had previously assumed, a second and considerably more contested body of evidence pushes this same basic question into even stranger territory currently occupied by one of the most actively disputed debates in the entire field of paleoanthropology. The Rising Star Cave System, located roughly 40 kilometers west of Johannesburg, South Africa, within a region known appropriately as the Cradle of Humankind, has yielded fossil remains belonging to more than 15 individuals of a previously unknown hominin species, formerly named Homo naledi, following its initial description in 2015. Homo naledi presents a genuinely unusual combination of physical traits. A brain roughly the size of an orange, dramatically smaller than that of modern humans or Neanderthals, combined with hands and feet showing features associated with both sophisticated manual dexterity and efficient upright walking. A combination that, on its own, already complicated simple assumptions about the direct relationship between brain size and behavioral sophistication. The discovery of Homo naledi itself, before any question of burial or deep cave use arose, is worth recounting in more detail, because the circumstances of its initial recovery in 2013 already hinted at the unusual physical challenges that would later become central to the burial debate. In September of 2013, recreational cavers exploring the Rising Star system, already a reasonably well-mapped cave popular among local caving enthusiasts, noticed fossil material within a chamber accessible only through an extremely narrow vertical chute, a passage so constricted that only individuals of slight build could physically pass through it. Recognizing the potential scientific importance of what they had found, the cavers reported the discovery to paleoanthropologist Lee Berger, who quickly recognized that the specific physical constraints of the access route would require an unusual approach to excavation. Berger issued a public call specifically seeking excavators with caving experience. And, critically, a body size small enough to navigate the narrow chute repeatedly without risk of becoming stuck. A call that led to the recruitment of a team that became informally known as the Underground Astronauts. A group of 6 women, all with relevant scientific training and caving experience, who ultimately conducted much of the detailed excavation work within the fossil chamber itself. The excavation ultimately recovered more than 1,500 individual fossil elements, representing a minimum of 15 distinct individuals ranging from infants to elderly adults. An extraordinarily rich single-species fossil assemblage by the standards of paleoanthropology, where most known hominin species are represented by a mere handful of specimens, sometimes only a single partial skeleton or a few isolated teeth. Formal scientific description of the new species, published in 2015, situated Homo naledi within a genuinely puzzling position on the broader hominin family tree. Its skull and dental features appeared relatively primitive, more reminiscent of much older hominin species dating back well over 1 million years, while its hands, wrists and feet showed a combination of traits considered relatively advanced, including capabilities associated with sophisticated tool use and fully efficient upright bipedal walking. This mixture of primitive and advanced features initially made Homo naledi difficult to date using comparative anatomical methods alone, since its skeletal proportions did not cleanly match any well-established position within the existing hominin timeline. Direct dating of the fossils themselves, using a combination of uranium series and other geochronological techniques applied to the surrounding sediment and to the fossils where feasible, eventually placed the remains at between roughly 335,000 and 241,000 years old. A genuinely startling result, because it meant this comparatively primitive-looking, small-brained hominin species had been living in southern Africa at the same broad period when anatomically modern humans were already beginning to emerge elsewhere on the same continent, raising still unresolved questions about how directly these two very different hominin populations might have interacted, competed, or coexisted across the shared landscape of the cradle of humankind. What has made Homo naledi genuinely central to the question this film is investigating is not simply that its remains were found underground, but specifically where underground they were found, and how difficult that location is to physically reach. The fossil-bearing chambers within the Rising Star system, most prominently the Naledi chamber and the neighboring Naledi chamber, require navigating an extended, genuinely difficult route from the nearest cave entrance, descending through narrow, twisting passages, at points requiring a person to squeeze through gaps barely wide enough for a human body to pass, along a route extending, in total, several hundred meters through complete and unbroken darkness. Lee Berger, the paleoanthropologist who has led the excavation team investigating this site since its initial discovery, described the physical and psychological difficulty of this route, directly in a 2023 interview. "It is dark. It is dangerous. It is difficult," he noted. And the individuals responsible for depositing hominin remains this deep within the system were going hundreds of meters back into the cave, down narrow chutes, and into confined spaces that raise, in his words, one of the field's great outstanding dilemmas. Were these individuals simply lost, unable to find their way back out? Or was there some specific, deliberate reason compelling repeated journeys to this exact location? It is worth pausing to consider, in genuinely concrete physical terms, what a journey of this kind would have actually felt like. Because modern researchers and cavers who have personally navigated routes comparable to those documented at Bruniquel and Rising Star consistently describe an experience considerably more disorienting and psychologically demanding than casual popular imagination typically credits. Complete cave darkness, the specific condition prevailing throughout the dark zone of any sufficiently deep cave system, differs fundamentally from ordinary nighttime darkness in a way that is difficult to appreciate without direct experience. Human eyes, given sufficient time, adapt remarkably well to low-light conditions under an open night sky, gradually extracting usable visual information from whatever faint ambient light remains available, whether starlight, moonlight, or distant artificial sources. Cave darkness offers no such adaptation opportunity because there is, quite simply, no light present to adapt to. Researchers and experienced cavers who have deliberately extinguished their light sources temporarily, while deep within a cave system, consistently report an experience of total sensory absence, distinct from anything achievable on the surface. No adaptation occurs, no shapes gradually resolve, because there is no photonic information reaching the eye at all, at any wavelength, under any degree of adaptation. Lee Berger's own description of his personal experience navigating the Rising Star system's narrowest passages, describing the journey as, in his own words, the most horrible thing he had ever done in his life, and simultaneously the best, captures something genuinely important about the specific psychological demands this kind of passage places on a person. Demands that extend well beyond simple physical difficulty. Extremely narrow passages, of the kind documented at multiple points along the route to Rising Star's fossil-bearing chambers, require a caver to exhale to reduce chest circumference, to carefully plan body positioning several moves in advance, and to manage genuine claustrophobic response while maintaining the composure necessary to continue moving forward, rather than becoming genuinely stuck partway through a constriction. A scenario carrying obvious and severe survival implications in an environment this remote from any possible rescue. This physical and psychological reality matters directly for how this film's central question should be understood. The journeys this film has documented at Bruniquel and Rising Star were not comfortable, casual, or low-stakes undertakings that a Paleolithic group might reasonably have made on a passing whim. They represented genuine physical ordeals, requiring real courage, real physical capability, and real psychological resilience to complete successfully, let alone to complete repeatedly across multiple separate occasions. as the evidence at both sites strongly suggests occurred. Whatever motivation drove these journeys needed to be substantial enough to reliably overcome not just the practical logistical challenges already discussed, fuel management, route memory, physical navigation of constricted passages, but also this genuine, direct psychological burden of sustained total darkness and severe physical confinement, a combination that, even for experienced modern cavers equipped with reliable artificial lighting, remains a genuinely demanding undertaking rather than a routine one. Beginning with a series of papers first circulated as preprints in 2023 and subsequently developed further through 2025, Berger's research team has argued for a specific and genuinely striking interpretation of this evidence: that Homo naledi deliberately, repeatedly carried the bodies of deceased individuals deep into these specific chambers, dug shallow depressions in the chamber floor, placed bodies within them in what researchers describe as fetal-like positions, and covered them with sediment, behavior the team explicitly characterizes as intentional burial. Supporting this interpretation, the team has additionally reported evidence of controlled fire use within the relevant passages, including soot deposits on chamber ceilings and recovered charcoal fragments, alongside a series of geometric markings, including cross-hatched patterns, X-shapes, and other simple engraved marks, cut directly into the walls of a corridor connecting the fossil-bearing chambers. Markings the team has proposed may represent deliberate, meaningful symbols rather than incidental damage. If accurate, this interpretation would represent something genuinely extraordinary: deliberate mortuary behavior, deep intentional cave use, controlled fire management, and possibly even meaningful symbolic marking, all performed by a hominin species with a brain roughly 1/3 the size of a modern human's, at a date currently estimated between 335,000 and 241,000 years ago. A full 160,000 years or more before the earliest confidently accepted evidence of deliberate burial by either Homo sapiens or Neanderthals anywhere else in the world. This claim has not gone unchallenged, and the resulting scientific dispute has been genuinely heated, playing out publicly across peer-reviewed journals, competing preprint servers, and considerable mainstream media coverage. Driven in part by a companion Netflix documentary and popular book that presented Berger's conclusions with a degree of narrative confidence that many working researchers considered premature given the underlying evidence's still contested status. A formal peer-reviewed critique, published in the Journal of Human Evolution and authored by a group of researchers with specific expertise spanning biological anthropology, archaeology, geochronology, and rock art analysis, directly challenged the burial claim on multiple grounds. The critique argued that no clear sedimentological evidence, meaning direct, unambiguous physical evidence within the surrounding soil and sediment layers themselves, actually supports the specific claim that bodies were deliberately placed within deliberately excavated pits, as opposed to a range of alternative, non-intentional scenarios that could plausibly account for the same skeletal accumulation pattern. Bodies or body parts transported into these chambers by periodic water flow remains accumulated through natural death trap dynamics, in which individuals became lost or trapped and died in place without any burial behavior whatsoever, or disturbance and redistribution of remains by scavenging carnivores over an extended period. A separate, related critique specifically addressed the claimed engravings, arguing that current dating limitations make it genuinely impossible to confirm the markings were made by Homo naledi at all, rather than by later visitors, potentially even modern humans exploring the same cave system at some considerably more recent point, and cautioning that the broader claim of deliberate symbolic production lacked the kind of rigorous, independently verifiable evidence the field generally requires before accepting a finding of this magnitude. Berger's team has directly responded to these specific criticisms in subsequent published work, including an expanded and revised version of their original burial claim published through eLife in 2025, incorporating new excavation results from additional areas within the relevant chambers, and presenting what they describe as multiple independent lines of evidence explicitly excluding the alternative, non-intentional scenarios raised by their critics. The exchange remains, as of this film's production, genuinely unresolved. Independent researchers not directly affiliated with either side of this specific dispute, including anthropologist Michael Petraglia of Griffith University, have offered measured assessments suggesting the case for deliberate burial appears reasonably convincing on balance, while simultaneously acknowledging that the currently available evidence is unlikely to satisfy every skeptical reviewer in the field. It is worth examining the specific back and forth of the Homo naledi burial debate in somewhat greater technical detail, because the precise nature of the disagreement reveals something genuinely instructive about how difficult it actually is to distinguish deliberate behavior from natural, accidental processes when working with evidence this old and this deeply buried. The core of Berger's team's argument rests substantially on the specific spatial relationship between the recovered skeletal material and the surrounding sediment. In a genuine burial, the argument runs, a body placed within a deliberately excavated pit and then covered would be expected to show a specific pattern. Bones remaining in reasonably close anatomical association with one another, consistent with decomposition having occurred within a confined, rapidly sediment-covered space, rather than being scattered by water movement or disturbed by scavenging animals over an extended period before final burial. Berger's team has pointed to exactly this kind of preserved anatomical association at multiple points within the naledi and hill antechamber, excavation areas as their primary physical evidence supporting deliberate burial. The critic's central counter-argument does not dispute that this anatomical association exists. It disputes whether this specific pattern actually requires deliberate human burial to explain it. Natural processes, the critique argues, are fully capable of producing broadly similar patterns of preserved anatomical association without any burial behavior whatsoever. A body that came to rest within a naturally occurring depression in the cave floor, whether through an individual becoming lost and dying in place, or through water transport, depositing remains within an existing natural low point, could subsequently become covered by ordinary, entirely natural sediment. Accumulation processes operating over an extended period. Sediment washing in gradually with periodic water flow, or accumulating through ordinary processes of mineral deposition and cave floor development that operate continuously in most cave environments, regardless of any human or hominin activity. Distinguishing definitively between these two scenarios, deliberate burial in an excavated pit versus natural sediment accumulation over a body that came to rest in a pre-existing depression, requires extremely precise sedimentological analysis, capable of identifying subtle differences in soil layering, particle size distribution, and depositional history that can be genuinely difficult to interpret with full confidence, even using modern geoarchaeological techniques. This is precisely the kind of technical dispute that does not resolve quickly or cleanly, and the 2025 eLife publication represents Berger's team's most detailed attempt yet to address these specific sedimentological objections directly, presenting expanded geochemical and stratigraphic analysis intended to more rigorously exclude the natural accumulation alternative. Whether this expanded analysis will ultimately satisfy the field's most skeptical reviewers remains, as this film has already noted, genuinely unresolved. What can be said with confidence is that this level of technical scrutiny, however frustrating it may be for anyone hoping for a clean, immediate answer, represents exactly the kind of rigorous process the field is supposed to apply to a claim of this magnitude and this potential significance for our understanding of hominin cognitive and cultural evolution. A finding this consequential, deliberate mortuary behavior in a small-brained hominin species, dated 160,000 years before any comparable confirmed behavior elsewhere, genuinely warrants exactly this degree of sustained, adversarial scientific examination before the broader field accepts it as established fact, rather than a compelling but still contested hypothesis. It is also worth noting how this specific controversy has reshaped public communication practices within paleoanthropology more broadly, because the intensity of the backlash against Berger's team's initial media rollout has prompted genuine reflection within the field about the appropriate relationship between exciting preliminary findings and the slower, more cautious pace of formal peer review. The decision to release detailed claims through a Netflix documentary and popular book before the underlying scientific papers had completed peer review drew pointed criticism from multiple quarters, not necessarily because the underlying claims were considered impossible, but because presenting contested, still developing scientific conclusions with the narrative. Confidence of settled documentary fact risked misleading a general audience about how provisional this kind of frontier research genuinely is. This tension between the genuine public appetite for dramatic scientific storytelling and the deliberately slow, adversarial, self-correcting nature of legitimate scientific process is not unique to the Homo naledi case. But few recent paleoanthropological debates have illustrated it as vividly or as publicly. None of this should obscure the genuinely remarkable core of what both the supporters and critics of the burial hypothesis agree upon. Whatever ultimately explains the specific skeletal patterns at Rising Star, something repeatedly carried Homo naledi bodies or drew living Homo naledi individuals deep into one of the most physically difficult cave environments documented anywhere in the paleoanthropological record. A base-level fact that remains genuinely extraordinary, regardless of which side of the burial debate eventually prevails. Whatever the ultimate resolution of this specific dispute, and it is worth being honest that, at the time of this film's production, there is no such resolution yet, the underlying behavioral question Homo naledi raises connects directly back to the central puzzle this entire film has been built around. Regardless of whether the specific burial interpretation eventually holds up under continued scrutiny, the base-level physical fact of the matter remains undisputed by any party to this debate. Individuals belonging to this small-brained hominin species repeatedly entered a genuinely difficult, genuinely dangerous, completely lightless cave environment, navigating several hundred meters of narrow, disorienting passage for some reason that had nothing whatsoever to do with shelter from weather or protection from surface predators. Since both of those practical benefits were already fully available at a location vastly closer to the entrance. Having established, across 3 separate and independently dated cases, La Garma, Bruniquel, and Rising Star, that deep, deliberate dark zone cave use is a real, physically documented, and repeatedly occurring pattern across an enormous span of time, and across multiple distinct hominin lineages. It is worth turning to the practical physical mechanics that may help explain at least part of what made this kind of deep cave use possible and potentially appealing in the first place. Deep cave environments possess a genuinely unusual thermal property, one that any modern caver quickly learns to appreciate, and that ancient cave users would have discovered through direct, repeated physical experience. Once a cave system extends far enough beyond its entrance to be shielded from direct surface airflow, drafts, and convection currents driven by outside weather, its internal temperature stabilizes remarkably close to the long-term average annual surface temperature of the surrounding region, and remains there with startling consistency. Caves with only a single opening, rather than multiple connected entrances that would allow air to circulate through and equalize with rapidly shifting surface conditions, exhibit this stabilizing effect most strongly. Measurements taken in well-studied single-entrance cave systems have documented internal temperature variation, as small as 0.5 degree Fahrenheit sustained across periods spanning a full century, an almost unimaginable degree of thermal stability compared to the often dramatic day-to-day and season-to-season temperature swings any Ice Age surface environment would have subjected its inhabitants to. For a Paleolithic population living through the genuinely brutal temperature extremes of glacial period Europe, bitter, prolonged winters capable of dropping surface temperatures dramatically below freezing for months at a stretch, followed by summers bringing their own extremes, a location offering close to year-round thermal consistency entirely independent of whatever conditions prevailed on the surface above would have represented a genuinely significant practical advantage. achievable without any technology more sophisticated than the willingness and the means to travel far enough into a suitable cave system to reach it. This thermal advantage, however, only explains part of the underlying pattern this film has traced, because it does not, on its own, account for cases like Bruniquel or Rising Star, where the depth involved, several hundred meters, well beyond what thermal stability alone would require, since caves generally reach their stable temperature within a relatively modest distance from any properly shielded single-mouth entrance, considerably exceeds what a purely practical thermal regulation explanation can comfortably accommodate. Whatever additional motivation drove Neanderthals at Bruniquel, and whatever motivation drove Homo naledi at Rising Star, to travel so far beyond the point where thermal stability, shelter from weather, and protection from surface predators had already been fully achieved. The specific evidence at both sites, deliberate construction in one case, and either deliberate mortuary behavior or some other equally deliberate and currently undetermined activity in the other, points towards something beyond simple, straightforward environmental practicality. It is worth directly addressing the predator question here as well, since it complicates the otherwise straightforward picture of caves as unambiguously safe environments. Ice Age Europe hosted its own formidable cave-adapted predator community, cave bears, cave lions, and cave hyenas among them, species that, as their common names directly indicate, made extensive use of cave environments in their own right, sometimes occupying the very same entrance zones and shallow interior chambers that human groups might otherwise have found most immediately appealing for shelter. This detail matters because it means the simple presence of a cave did not automatically guarantee safety. A specific cave or a specific chamber within a larger system needed to be genuinely unoccupied by dangerous competing wildlife before it could serve as reliable shelter for a human group. Traveling deeper into a system, well past any chamber accessible to a full-grown cave bear or cave lion navigating narrow, constricted passages, may have offered its own specific category of safety advantage, distinct from simple weather protection. Though this explanation, once again, struggles to fully account for depths as extreme as those documented at Bruniquel and Rising Star, well beyond what avoiding a competing predator would typically require. The broader phenomenon of deep, dark zone activity documented at Bruniquel and Rising Star connects to a considerably better known and considerably less contested body of evidence. The placement of some of the most celebrated Paleolithic cave art anywhere in the world, deliberately positioned deep within cave systems, well beyond the reach of any natural light whatsoever. Jaubert Cave in southern France, discovered in 1994 and dated to at least 36,000 years ago, contains some of the oldest and most technically accomplished figurative art currently known from anywhere on the planet. Detailed, carefully shaded depictions of lions, rhinoceroses, horses, and other Ice Age megafauna, painted with a sophistication that surprised researchers accustomed to assuming artistic technique should show a simple, steady progression from crude to refined across the span of the Upper Paleolithic. Many of Jaubert's most significant painted panels are located well within the cave's dark zone, in chambers that would have been completely inaccessible without carried light, positioned in a manner that suggests deliberate selection of location rather than simple convenience. Specific chamber walls chosen, researchers argue, for their particular shape, acoustic properties, or spatial relationship to other painted panels. Decisions that would only make sense if the artists themselves, and presumably at least some portion of their intended audience, were prepared to make the same kind of deliberate dark zone journey this film has already documented at Bruniquel. Lascaux, discovered in 1940 and considerably more famous in popular culture, presents a broadly similar pattern. Its most celebrated painted galleries, including the renowned Hall of the Bulls, requiring visitors to move well past the cave's natural light zone to view them. The specific placement of Paleolithic cave art within dark zone chambers, documented now at dozens of sites across France, Spain, and beyond, represents a genuinely widespread pattern rather than an isolated curiosity, one that art historians and archaeologists increasingly interpret as evidence that the dark zone itself carried some specific cultural or spiritual significance for Upper Paleolithic populations, a significance sufficiently important to justify the same category of logistical effort, technical fire-carrying capability, and accumulated route knowledge this film has already traced through the harder, more physically demanding evidence at Bruniquel. This connection matters for the broader argument this film has developed because it demonstrates that deep, deliberate dark zone activity was not confined to the two genuinely exceptional and still contested cases of Bruniquel and Rising Star. It represents, instead, one end of a considerably broader and better documented spectrum of behavior, stretching from confirmed, widely accepted deep cave art produced by anatomically modern humans back through the genuinely ambiguous and actively disputed Homo naledi evidence, and back further still to the confirmed, if functionally mysterious, Neanderthal construction at Bruniquel. Taken together, this spectrum suggests that willingness to travel deep into complete darkness, for reasons extending beyond simple physical shelter, may represent a considerably older and more widespread behavioral pattern among multiple hominin lineages than researchers had generally assumed. Before these specific sites were investigated in the detail modern dating and excavation techniques now allow. One further site deserves mention before this film's closing argument, because it adds yet another dimension to the broader pattern already traced across La Garma, Bruniquel, and Rising Star. A single cave system occupied, at different points across an immense span of time, by multiple genuinely distinct hominin populations. Denisova Cave, located in the Altai Mountains of southern Siberia, has produced some of the most genetically significant hominin fossil material recovered anywhere in the world, despite yielding remarkably few actual bone fragments, a situation resolved largely through advances in ancient DNA extraction, rather than through the recovery of substantial skeletal remains. Genetic analysis of fragmentary material recovered from the cave's sediment layers identified an entirely new hominin population, now known as the Denisovans, distinct from both Neanderthals and modern humans, known to science almost entirely through genetic evidence, rather than detailed skeletal anatomy. Remarkably, the cave's sediment layers have also yielded direct evidence of Neanderthal occupation, and, in one genuinely extraordinary case, the skeletal remains of a single individual, dubbed Denny by the research team that identified her, whose genome revealed her to be a first-generation hybrid with a Neanderthal mother and a Denisovan father. Direct physical proof that these two distinct hominin populations not only occupied the same cave system, if not necessarily simultaneously, but interbred directly with one another, at least occasionally. The cave itself extends into the surrounding hillside considerably less dramatically than Bruniquel or Rising Star, with its most significant fossil-bearing chambers located within a more moderate distance from the entrance than the extreme dark zone examples this film has focused on. But Denisova's broader significance for this film's argument lies less in its specific depth and more in what its long, layered occupation history demonstrates about cave use as a genuinely shared behavioral pattern across multiple distinct hominin lineages. Spanning, according to the site's full excavated sequence, several 100,000 years of intermittent use by Denisovans, Neanderthals, and eventually modern humans, each population apparently finding this same specific cave system worth returning to across an almost incomprehensible span of time. This pattern of shared, repeated, multi-species cave use reinforces the broader argument this film has developed regarding Bruniquel and Rising Star. Caves, and particularly caves offering the kind of thermal stability and physical protection already discussed, appear to have represented a genuinely valuable, genuinely contested resource across the hominin family tree. More broadly, valuable enough that multiple distinct populations, separated from one another by hundreds of thousands of years, and, in some documented cases, capable of directly interbreeding when their ranges and timelines happened to overlap, independently arrived at the same basic conclusion: that specific cave environments were worth the effort of sustained, repeated use, whatever the underlying specific motivation happened to be in any given case, at any given site, for any given hominin population involved. What emerges from taking all of this evidence together? The well-documented, comparatively cautious mainstream position on Paleolithic cave use generally, the genuine and increasingly well-documented exception represented by confirmed dwelling sites like La Gama, and the genuinely extreme, still actively debated cases represented by Bruniquel and Rising Star, is a considerably more layered picture than any single explanation can fully capture. Cave use during this immense span of prehistory appears to have operated across multiple genuinely distinct registers simultaneously: practical, easily explained shelter and thermal regulation near cave entrances, representing the overwhelming majority of confirmed prehistoric cave activity. Occasional, more sustained domestic occupation of the kind now confirmed at La Gama, and at the genuinely rare and extreme end of this spectrum, deliberate, dangerous and evidently meaningful journeys deep into completely lightless dark zone environments, undertaken by at least two distinct hominin lineages separated from one another by well over 100,000 years. For reasons that current evidence increasingly suggests were not primarily, or perhaps not at all, about straightforward physical survival. This last category, the genuinely deep, genuinely dangerous dark zone activity documented at Bruniquel and investigated with considerably more controversy at Rising Star, raises a question this film cannot fully answer, because the field investigating it has not yet fully answered it either. But the question itself is worth sitting with directly, because of what it implies about the minds capable of asking it in the first place. A journey 336 meters into absolute darkness, undertaken by a Neanderthal group carrying fire sufficient to work by for however long their construction required, or a journey of comparable difficulty undertaken repeatedly by a small-brained hominin species carrying the remains of their own dead, represents behavior that exceeds any purely reactive, purely survival-driven explanation available. It suggests, at minimum, planning extending well beyond the immediate moment, motivation sufficient to overcome genuine physical risk and genuine psychological discomfort, and some form of meaning attached to a specific, difficult-to-reach location that made the underlying effort, whatever its ultimate purpose, worth undertaking. Whether that meaning was social, ritual, mortuary, or something else current evidence cannot yet specify, the underlying fact remains genuinely remarkable, regardless of how the ongoing scientific disputes at Rising Star are eventually resolved. Long before anatomically modern humans painted the famous animal galleries, at sites like Lascaux or Jaubert, long before written language, long before anything resembling settled agricultural life, hominins were already willing to leave behind every practical advantage a cave entrance could offer: the light, the airflow, the easy retreat to open ground, and travel, deliberately and repeatedly, into a darkness so complete and so disorienting that losing one's light source meant, in the most literal possible sense, losing everything. Consider, finally, what this accumulated evidence suggests about the specific timing of these different journeys into darkness. Bruniquel occurred 176,000 years ago, produced by Neanderthals working alone, tens of thousands of years before modern humans ever set foot in Europe. The Rising Star evidence, whatever its final resolution, dates to a period between 335,000 and 241,000 years ago, produced by a hominin lineage that had already diverged from our own ancestors long before either event took place. Denisova Cave's occupation spans a similarly vast window, touching at least 3 distinct populations across hundreds of thousands of years. Lagama's confirmed dwelling, by contrast, is comparatively recent, dating to only 16,800 years ago, produced by anatomically modern humans essentially indistinguishable from ourselves. Laid end to end, these sites trace a timeline spanning more than 300,000 years, touching at least 3 and possibly 4 genuinely distinct hominin populations. There is a broader question worth sitting with directly before this film closes, because it extends well beyond the specific archaeological puzzles this film has traced, into territory touching on how researchers define the boundary between purely practical, survival-driven behavior and something closer to what we might comfortably call culture, ritual, or meaning-making. For much of the 20th century, the capacity for this kind of behavior, deliberate journeys undertaken for reasons beyond immediate survival necessity, sustained group cooperation toward a goal with no direct nutritional or defensive payoff, the deliberate marking or treatment of the dead, was treated as one of the defining, largely exclusive hallmarks separating fully modern human cognition from every other hominin species that had ever existed, including our closest evolutionary relatives. Evidence of this kind of behavior, wherever it appeared in the archaeological record, was generally assumed to indicate the presence of anatomically modern humans, or at minimum a species closely approaching modern cognitive capacity, since the underlying behavioral complexity seemed to demand exactly the kind of advanced symbolic thought long considered uniquely, definitively human. The evidence this film has traced directly complicates that assumption, and it does so from two independent directions simultaneously. Bruniquel demonstrates that Neanderthals, a species popular culture has often characterized inaccurately as cognitively simple, brutish cousins of modern humans, were capable of coordinated, planned, technically sophisticated group behavior, deep underground, in an environment offering no straightforward survival benefit. 130,000 years before modern humans arrived anywhere on the same continent. And Rising Star, whatever the ultimate resolution of its still active scientific dispute, demonstrates that a hominin species with a brain barely 1/3 the size of a modern human's was, at absolute minimum, physically capable of the kind of sustained, difficult, repeated dark zone activity this film has spent considerable time documenting. Activity that, if Berger's team's contested burial interpretation eventually holds up under continued scrutiny, would push deliberate mortuary behavior back by well over 100,000 years, beyond its previously earliest confirmed appearance in the fossil record, and would attribute that behavior to a species with a demonstrably smaller brain than either Homo sapiens or Neanderthals. Neither of these findings, considered individually or together, definitively proves that brain size is irrelevant to behavioral complexity. That would be an overreach the evidence does not currently support. But both findings genuinely complicate any simple, direct equation between raw brain size and the specific capacity for planned, cooperative, seemingly non-utilitarian behavior. Something considerably more complicated than brain volume alone appears to determine which hominin species were capable of this particular category of behavior, and the ongoing scientific effort to understand exactly what that something is. Social structure, specific cognitive architecture, unrelated to overall brain size, cultural transmission mechanisms, or some combination not yet fully identified, represents one of the genuinely active, unresolved frontiers in the broader study of human evolution. It is worth being honest, too, about the limits of what any single film like this one can responsibly claim. The Homo naledi burial hypothesis remains contested precisely because the underlying evidence permits more than one reasonable interpretation, and presenting it here as settled fact would repeat exactly the communication error that drew such pointed criticism toward the original 2023 rollout. What this film can responsibly claim is narrower and in some ways more interesting. That multiple hominin populations, using nothing but fire, memory, and raw physical determination, were willing to travel far beyond any point where practical survival logic applies. And that the scientific effort to understand why is very much still underway, playing out in real time across ongoing excavations, competing papers, and ongoing peer review, rather than sitting comfortably concluded in some textbook chapter already written. What ties this entire investigation together across 3 continents, across a time span exceeding 170,000 years, and across at minimum 2 and possibly 3 distinct hominin lineages, is a single, consistent observation. Somewhere in our shared evolutionary history, multiple different hominin populations independently arrived at a willingness to leave behind every immediate practical advantage, light, air, easy retreat, straightforward safety, in favor of a journey into complete darkness that offered no additional survival benefit whatsoever, overstopping at the entrance. Whatever specifically compelled the Neanderthals at Bruniquel, and whatever specifically compelled Homo naledi at Rising Star, remains, honestly, beyond what current evidence can fully specify. But the shared willingness to make that journey at all, repeatedly, deliberately, across such an enormous span of evolutionary time, suggests that the particular kind of mind capable of finding meaning worth pursuing into total darkness may be considerably older and may extend across a considerably wider range of the hominin family tree than anyone investigating these caves expected to find when they first switched on their lights and started walking into the dark.